It was a calm evening at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center when President Donald Trump made a quiet, unannounced visit. Flanked by 2 Secret Service agents, he moved through the halls without press or fanfare. This wasn't a photo op. He came to speak with veterans, those who had sacrificed everything in conflicts most Americans only read about. After exiting one of the patient rooms, he passed a young nurse in blue scrubs standing beside a cart. Her badge read, Marina Lell, RN. Her face bore the exhaustion of long hours and emotional weight, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, eyes ringed with fatigue. Trump gave her a polite nod. But Marina hesitated, then, with sudden courage, leaned forward and whispered, "Sir, I know I'm just a nurse, but I need to say something for someone who can't." The agent stiffened. Trump paused, eyebrows slightly raised, and told her gently to go on. Her voice trembled. She told him about a man in room 114B, Specialist Dean Granger, a double amputee from Afghanistan who no longer spoke. No visitors. No family. But something remarkable, he smiled when Marina read him Trump's speeches. That day, she said, he cried, not from sadness, but from feeling seen. Her voice cracked as she admitted she didn't know why she was speaking up, only that this man was fading, and no one seemed to notice. Trump studied her quietly and asked the man's name. "Dean Granger, sir," she replied. With a solemn nod, Trump headed for 114B. Marina stood frozen, heart racing, unsure if she'd just made a mistake, or done something profoundly right. The room was dim and quiet, the steady beeping of machines the only sound. Specialist Granger lay still, eyes open, staring at nothing. His hands rested atop a hospital blanket. Trump approached and sat down beside him, calling his name softly. No response, until Trump gently placed a hand on the bed. Then, a blink. Recognition. Marina, peering in from the door, mouthed, "He understands." Trump began to speak quietly, acknowledging the soldier's sacrifice and expressing his gratitude. On the table lay a journal filled with notes, likely from nurses, detailing small moments, reading Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, playing Johnny Cash. One entry that stood out, "He smiled when I read Trump's 4th of July speech." It was signed, Mir Lell. Trump looked at the soldier and said, "That nurse of yours told me everything. She says you're a fighter." I believe her. A single tear rolled down Dean's cheek. Trump reached into his coat, removed the American flag pin from his lapel, and placed it gently on the bedside table. Marina, now overcome with emotion, wiped her eyes. She had never seen Dean react so deeply. As Trump stood to leave, he turned to her and said, "You did the right thing." She had no idea then that the chain of events she'd set in motion was only just beginning. That night, Trump couldn't sleep. The image of the silent soldier haunted him, but more than that, the voice of the nurse stayed with him. A woman not seeking attention or reward, simply trying to give voice to someone forgotten. By morning, he had requested Dean Granger's full file. Inside was a letter Dean had written before trauma robbed him of speech. It read, "If I go silent, let someone speak for me. If I can't stand, let someone stand beside me. If I lose everything, please remind me I still matter." It was haunting. Trump sat in silence, holding the paper. "Do we have her name?" he asked. Yes, they told him. Marina Lell. 3 years at Walter Reed. Lives alone. Volunteers at the Veterans Shelter on weekends. Trump nodded. "I want to do something for her." By lunch, 3 people in Washington had been tasked with telling Marina's story, not for politics, but to honor her quiet bravery. Meanwhile, unaware, Marina was back on the hospital floor. Changing linens. Whispering hope. She had no idea the world was about to know her name. The next morning began as any other. Marina sipped her vending machine coffee, clocked in, and started her rounds. When she arrived at room 114B, Specialist Granger was more alert than she'd ever seen. "Good morning, soldier," she smiled. Dean blinked, then slowly raised his hand and gave her a thumbs up. She gasped. It was the most movement he'd made in weeks. Then he pointed to a note on the table. Not his handwriting. It read, "You matter. Keep fighting. DT." Her hands trembled. Could it be? Suddenly, the hospital intercom crackled, "Nurse Marina Lell, please report to administration." Confused, she walked down the corridor, sensing stares and hushed whispers from staff. One doctor even offered her a knowing smile. At admin, a woman in a dark suit greeted her. "Miss Lell, I'm with the office of the president. May we talk?" Marina's heart pounded. The woman gave a soft smile. "Let's just say, your whisper was heard." By 10 a.m., news vans circled the hospital, not for scandal, but for something rare. The headlines soon spread, "Nurses whisper to President moves a nation." Marina hadn't spoken to a single reporter. She simply turned off her phone, overwhelmed. Down the hall, Specialist Granger received visitors, veterans outreach reps with gifts and a promise. "The president asked us to make sure this man gets everything he needs." One of them turned to her and asked, "You're Marina?" He smiled. "This is about you too." Back in the break room, a letter awaited her on White House stationery. It read, "Marina, sometimes the quietest voices carry the most truth. Thank you for being a soldier for the voiceless. Tomorrow, I'm telling America your story, with your permission. DJT." Marina sat down, shaking. The tears came, tears of exhaustion, gratitude, disbelief. She'd become a nurse because she'd lost her brother, a Marine, when she was just 16. She couldn't save him, but she could fight for others like him. And now, the world would finally know. She never sought the spotlight, but now the world was watching. Still, Marina Lell felt this moment wasn't about her, it was about the people she served. Walking out of the break room with the president's letter trembling in her hands, she paused at her locker. Inside was a photo of her brother, Marine Lance Corporal Nathan Lell, lost in Fallujah at just 22. She touched the image gently and whispered, "I wish you could see this, Nate." That evening, as she returned home, a wall of reporters waited outside her building. Flashbulbs popped. Microphones were pushed forward. Shouts filled the air, "Nurse Lell, how did you meet the president? Is it true you read his speeches to a veteran?" But before she could respond, her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Nari, stepped in. "This girl helped my husband walk again after his stroke," she said firmly. "Let her rest." Marina slipped quietly inside, overwhelmed. She sat in silence for an hour, unsure what to feel, until a message lit up her phone. It was from the White House. They assured her she didn't have to speak to anyone, her privacy would be respected, but her story had already begun to spread, and for all the right reasons. Attached was a video of President Trump speaking to a group of veterans. This nurse, Marina Lell, spoke not for herself, but for a man who could no longer speak. Her whisper carried a wounded soldier's truth. "She reminded me that service doesn't end on the battlefield, sometimes it wears scrubs." Marina's hand flew to her mouth. Tears streamed silently. She hadn't just been heard, she'd become a voice for others like her. By the next morning, Walter Reed was inundated with calls, media, foundations, and families wanting to learn more about the nurse whose whisper had shaken a room. The hospital director called her in. "Marina," he said gently, "the president asked if you'd be open to one short interview." "No pressure. The journalist is a veteran herself." Marina hesitated. She wasn't someone who wore makeup. She didn't crave fame. But then she remembered Dean's quiet strength, the note from Trump, her brother's photograph. She nodded. "If it helps other nurses or veterans like Dean, I'll do it." That afternoon, she met with retired Army captain and CBS correspondent Naomi Brooks. Naomi was kind, calm, and sincere. "No makeup crew," she said. "Just you and me." The camera rolled. Marina took a breath. I became a nurse, she said, because I wanted to help the ones who come back broken. Not all wounds bleed. She shared Dean's story, how he hadn't spoken in months, how reading brought him peace, how the whisper wasn't about politics, it was about pain, about not letting someone be forgotten. I didn't think the president would stop, she said quietly. I just had to try. Naomi asked what he said. Marina smiled faintly. He asked for Dean's name. That's when I knew, he really heard me. The interview lasted just 12 minutes, but by nightfall, it had racked up over 4 million views. Back at Walter Reed, something had changed. Dean Granger's room was now filled with handmade posters and messages from strangers. Keep fighting, Dean. You are not forgotten. We heard your nurse. Now we hear you. Though still nonverbal, Dean began to engage more, his eyes more expressive. On a quiet Wednesday morning, Marina entered his room to find 2 therapists and a nurse surrounding him. Watch this, one said. Dean was sitting upright, strapped into a supportive harness, gripping a parallel bar. With visible strain, he pulled himself to his feet. Marina gasped. Dean's arms shook, but he held firm, then slowly lifted a hand and saluted. The room erupted in cheers. Someone caught the moment on video. Within hours, the footage was everywhere. Veteran stands for the first time in 2 years after nurses whisper to Trump. Even the president reposted it. This is what hope looks like. Proud of you, Dean. Proud of you, Nurse Marina. For once, the internet wasn't divided, it was united in awe. Marina returned home to find an envelope in her mailbox. No address, just her name, covered in crayon hearts. Inside was a handwritten letter from a little girl named Ellie. Dear Nurse Marina, my daddy can't talk because of war. I read your story to him and he smiled. Thank you for being brave. I want to be a nurse too. Alongside was a drawing, a nurse holding hands with a soldier, and a small girl watching with a heart above them. Marina sat on the couch and cried. That night, she posted Ellie's letter on social media with the caption, "This is why we whisper. For the ones who can't speak. For the ones who need to see hope." The post went viral. Teachers began sharing it in classrooms. Nursing students quoted her in essays. Late-night hosts talked about her, not as a celebrity, but as a reminder of quiet courage. The following day, Marina was called to the hospital auditorium. She assumed it was a staff meeting, until she saw flags, cameras, and the unmistakable presence of Secret Service. President Trump entered and took the podium. We often honor those in uniform, he began, but today I want to honor someone who wore different colors, blue scrubs, and carried out a different kind of mission. Then he turned toward her. Nurse Lel, would you join me? Marina froze, then slowly stepped forward. Trump opened a small velvet box. Inside was a gold pin. This is the Presidential Volunteer Service Award, with distinction, he said. You didn't ask for recognition. You didn't need a stage. But you gave someone their voice back. As he pinned it to her uniform, she whispered, "Thank you for listening." He whispered back, "Thank you for speaking." The crowd erupted in applause. Dean Granger, seated nearby in a wheelchair, lifted his hand in salute. It was the same one he had given her in his hospital room. That moment would replay across every network for days, but for Marina, it simply felt like everything had come full circle. Even after the honor, Marina returned to her regular shifts. She still cleaned wounds, still comforted grieving families, still worked weekends at the veterans' shelter. Her supervisor encouraged her to take a break. You've earned it. But Marina just smiled. They still need me. That night, a new patient arrived, Specialist Tara King. Fresh out of combat. Silent. Withdrawn. Barely moving. No one could reach her. Except Marina. She sat by Tara's bed night after night, reading, not politics this time, but poetry, soldier letters, and even Ellie's crayon note. On the third night, Tara whispered, "You're her." The whisper nurse. Marina smiled softly. "I'm just someone who stayed." Tara reached out and held her hand. Sometimes, the most powerful thing isn't a title or a speech. It's showing up again and again. That week, Walter Reed saw a 15% increase in volunteer applications, because when the world sees courage in scrubs, it moves people to act. They wanted to follow. A week later, Marina received a package at the hospital. Inside were 237 letters, some typed, most handwritten, from veterans, active duty soldiers, and military families. One read, "I haven't been hugged since my last deployment. After watching what you did, my daughter came home from school and hugged me, for the first time in years." Signed, Retired Sergeant Paul Ramirez. Another simply said, "I wanted to end my life last month. But I watched your story, and suddenly, I wanted to try again." No name. Just, anonymous. Every lunch break, Marina sat in a quiet corner reading them, tears streaming down her face. She replied when she could. She wasn't famous. She wasn't wealthy. She was simply someone who had made space, for others to be seen again. She created a bulletin board in the Veterans Wing and titled it "Whispers That Echo." Each day, she pinned a new letter. Families stopped to read them out loud. Veterans began to bring their own stories. And slowly, patients who hadn't spoken in months started opening up. Marina hadn't just whispered. She'd started something far greater. One night, her phone rang with an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hi. Is this Marina Lell?" "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Peter Granger. Dean's father." She stood up, startled. I. No need to say anything," he interrupted, voice trembling. "I haven't heard from my son in 2 years. Doctor told me not to expect anything. But yesterday, he called." Peter paused. He didn't talk, not exactly. But he made sounds. Tried. Then he just held the phone, like he didn't want to let go. Marina wiped a tear. "He's getting stronger," Peter said. "Because of you. You didn't just care for him. You believed in him. And that changed everything." She sat down slowly. No award, no speech, no photograph could match that call. Dean was finding his way back, not alone, but with someone walking beside him. Moved by the letters, by the salute, and by Ellie's crayon-drawn heart, Marina began something new. She called it the Whisper Project. The idea was simple: volunteers recorded short voice messages, poems, letters, hopeful words, and sent them to recovering veterans across the country. With help from the hospital's IT team, they built a small portal where anyone could upload a message. Nurses could play them during therapy or quiet nights. On day 1, they received 89 recordings. Within a week, over 2,000 poured in. School kids. Teachers. Veterans. Even a few public figures. One patient whispered, "I haven't heard kindness like that since Iraq." Marina didn't do interviews. She didn't monetize it. She simply kept building, quietly, steadily. A whisper had become a chorus. But the most beautiful part? Most people who sent a message never knew if theirs was heard. They sent it anyway. One afternoon, during a quiet shift, Marina helped clear out an old storage room. Behind boxes of dusty files and unused equipment, she found a small case labeled "Unclaimed, 2011." Inside was a purple heart, still in its velvet box. She brought it to the admin desk. After some digging, they traced it back to a veteran who had died alone, no listed next of kin. His name was Charles McHenry. Marina couldn't leave it there. That weekend, she visited the cemetery. His grave was simple. No flowers. No visitors. Just a name. She knelt, placed the medal gently on the stone, and whispered, "You are remembered, Charles. You earned this." A passerby took a photo. By Monday, the image had spread across the internet. Nurse who whispered to President honors forgotten hero. And that one moment sparked something larger. The VA launched a nationwide initiative, Project Honor Return, to locate and deliver every unclaimed medal to families or resting places. All because one nurse refused to let silence be the final word. Though Marina had always avoided the spotlight, when invited to testify at a congressional hearing on veteran care, she said yes. Not for herself, but for Dean. For Tara. For Charles. And for Ellie's father. She walked into the chamber with a folded note in her pocket, her brother's. She didn't present statistics. She didn't raise her voice. She told stories. Stories of men who returned broken, and women who stayed to piece them back together. Stories of silence. Of whispered hope. She closed her testimony with one quiet sentence. Not every hero holds a gun. Some hold a hand. And sometimes, that saves more lives than will ever count. The room was still. Then applause, genuine, not performative. That same day, 3 new veteran recovery initiatives passed unanimously. Because sometimes, change doesn't shout. It whispers. Months later, Marina walked into room 114B. Dean was sitting up, brighter, stronger. He looked at her and said, "Hi." Her breath caught. He said it again, weak, raspy, but clear. "Hi." She rushed to his side, tears already falling. "Dean." He reached for her hand. Squeezed. "I heard every word," he said slowly. "Thank you, for being my voice." She sat with him, holding his hand. Outside, the flag flew at half-mast, for another fallen soldier. But in that room, life was being reclaimed. Quietly. Without cameras. Just one man. One nurse. And the moment when silence finally broke. A year after the original whisper, Marina received another letter. Handwritten. Dear Marina. Some stories fade. Yours never will. The whisper you gave me that day still echoes in my mind. It changed how I listen. It changed how I lead. You didn't seek glory, but you gave others a reason to keep going. You showed America what strength really looks like. With gratitude. Donald J. Trump. Inside the envelope was a second pin. Smaller. Simpler. It read, "For service beyond the call." She placed it beside the first one, both now symbols of something far greater than recognition. One morning, a new nursing student arrived at Walter Reed. She was quiet, shy, a little clumsy. Marina greeted her gently. "Why'd you choose this path?" The girl smiled nervously. "Because of a story I saw. About a nurse who whispered to a president. That whisper made my dad smile again. He was broken. Now, he's here with me." She pointed out the window. A man in a wheelchair looked up and saluted. Marina's breath caught. It was Ellie's father. The girl's name tag read, E. Miller, nursing intern. Ellie had grown up. And she was ready to carry the whisper forward. Years passed. The world changed. But the story remained, told in classrooms, clinics, family circles. The story of a nurse who never wanted attention. Of a whisper that didn't demand power, just presence. Of a president who paused. Of a veteran who stood again. And of a little girl who became a nurse. One whisper. One life at a time. And on a quiet evening, long after retirement, Marina Lell stood before a class of young nurses. She didn't give a speech. She just said. Speak when others can't. Stay when others leave. And always, always, whisper with purpose. The room was silent.